correctly. All right, we're recording. All right, so Susan, please go ahead and talk about the impact of COVID on copyright.
You're still muted, Susan.
There. Is that better?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, now we can hear you.
Wait, now what happened to my slides? Okay. So, hi, my name is Susan Kendall, and I'm the copyright librarian at Michigan State University Libraries. So, I'm going to just talk about not so much what MSU is doing, but more, you asked me a number of questions, and I know that some of you may or may not be in a place where you have a copyright librarian or get any kind of copyright advice, or maybe you get it from your legal counsel. I don't know. I'm not really sure what your situations are. But anyway, so I'm going to talk here. First of all, I have to have this disclaimer that I'm not a lawyer. And I'm sharing this information as a librarian to other librarians, and it's based on, I've taken a number of professional development classes on it, reading and so forth, but it's not legal advice. So you have to seek out your own institution's legal counsel if you want to really get advice about what to do. Okay. So the first thing, so it's interesting, you know, Beth just talked, because what people don't seem to understand when they come to me with these copyright questions is that your licenses and terms of use take precedence over copyright law. So most of the time when people are asking questions about using your eResources, it's not even a copyright question. Now it's an eResource license question. So that's the first thing to keep in mind. Copyright law is going to cover your print books and journals, online materials that don't have terms of use, and your audiovisual materials that don't have licenses. But your licenses are going to cover all your library licensed ebooks, journals, streaming video. They also cover freely available online materials, like YouTube has a terms of use. It's spelled out on what you can do with YouTube videos and what you can't. It's right there on the site. Licenses also govern Netflix, Hulu, and everybody's personal streaming accounts. And they cover computer games. So what's the difference between copyright law and the licenses? So copyright law requires a lot of interpretation. And you probably have heard the term fair use. The fair use section is quite flexible. The fair use section is situation specific. So we can talk a little bit about that, but the pandemic can be a consideration. Unfortunately, copyright law is very biased in favor of face-to-face teaching, not online teaching. So that's kind of sad. It hasn't really kept up with that. The other thing about copyright law is that circumvention of protections of electronic resources is usually prohibited. So licenses that you sign, maybe that's your role to sign, or you read them over and your boss signs it. So the licenses and terms of use are often very detailed and specific. It's not quite as like open to interpretation as copyright law. And it's not really very flexible. It basically says what you can and can't do. It's also not situation specific. Your licenses don't say anything about pandemics or anything like that. I mean, maybe they do. I don't know. I'm just, I'm guessing they don't have a lot of situations. I mean, you may have built in clauses about disasters and things. So, that could be a thing. But the other thing about your licenses is that some of them can be negotiated, changed, amended, and that sort of thing. So that's the power you have. So for your library licenses in terms of use, my suggestion would be, if you have issues, to develop a plan of action. I know you all read your subscription licenses in terms of use. That's probably part of your job. But think about negotiating your terms, or even going back to some of them and talking to them about uses that may have cropped up during the pandemic. A couple things that we've negotiated at MSU, we've negotiated the use of images/text from our subscribed content for posting in learning management systems and course packs. Now, some people would think, well, maybe this is no big deal. It's already our subscribed content. But reading our licenses, we did not see that we were allowed to use those images and things in course packs without paying a second time. So we went back and negotiated and said, we don't want to pay a second time. We got addenda to our licenses for that. Another thing that's more recent is that our streaming video licenses don't say anything about sharing via Zoom. I mean, that wasn't really a thing before the pandemic. But we went back to one of ours and we negotiated that we were allowed, that we already had public performance rights, but that was for showing a video on campus. So we talked to them and they said, sure, you can have a Zoom film night instead. And so they said that was fine. So now our library, and we know some other libraries, have been having film nights via Zoom because they were able to get that into their license. Okay, so some of this is background. You may already know some of this. Whenever I give a talk, I don't know what people know and don't know. So I like to just get us up to speed. So a lot of people say, well, what about the educational exception? So the problem with the educational part of copyright law is that, like I said, it's really biased toward face-to-face classroom teaching. You can perform all kinds of stuff in the face-to-face classroom. Now, this TEACH Act was supposed to help with online teaching, but unfortunately, it didn't go as far as saying that everything was allowed that was allowed in the face-to-face classroom is now allowed in online teaching. It only allowed reasonable and limited portions of a film, not the entire film, whereas in a classroom, you can show the entire film. So that was too bad. It also says that you can show things in an online class, but it's talking about a synchronous online class, not a video that you create that students can watch whenever they want to. So it would be like showing a class, and you'd show the same materials as if you were in a face-to-face classroom. So that's another reason. So actually, what I understand, most copyright librarians and schools don't even bother with the TEACH Act much anymore because it's not that helpful. And a lot of the stuff we do in online education, posting videos for the entire semester, all that kind of stuff is not covered. Again, the idea the law has about online teaching is that it just happens and then it's over. There's no posting, it just goes away like a face-to-face classroom. So I just post this to say, like, most of us just don't worry about this too much because it's not that helpful. More we start to look at things, the fair use part of the law, because it is more flexible. And you've probably heard about the four factors. You have to consider all of them. And this is where it gets tricky. Um, just because it's educational doesn't mean it's fair use, but I mean, it helps. Um, there's the nature of the work. There's the amount of the work that you're usually using. Usually it's short portions that are considered okay, but posting large amounts of a book would not be okay. And then factor 4 is important too, effect of the use on the potential market. For instance, if a professor's trying to get you to scan like a large portion of a textbook so that students don't have to buy the textbook, that's not fair use, unfortunately. So those are some things to think about. So I was sent a few questions before my talk. One of the questions was, can I include parts of required textbooks in course packs? And I guess this question is coming because of the pandemic. I assume that possibly you had the textbook on reserve in the library for students to use, and now that's not really an option if your library's closed. So you're asking, can I put parts of a textbook in the course pack? So the things I would have you consider are, am I trying to replace too much of the book? Because what I've done at MSU is I've looked at, how much of the book we're trying to use. Does it look like we're really trying to replace too much of the book? And so we're still going with only small portions of the books we can post or put in a course pack. Well, usually course packs involve paying royalties because you're printing them off. So I would recommend posting in a learning management system rather than making a course pack if you want to save more money for the students. Another question, is the book available for purchase electronically? So you can make more of a fair use case if the book is simply not available electronically. But if the book is available electronically and you just don't want to buy it, that's less of a fair use factor. Now, the question is how expensive it is. I mean, there are certain, most of you don't have a medical school, but we have a medical school, and there's certain books we can't get unless we buy a $50,000 database. So that's a significant amount as opposed to like $150 book. So things to keep in mind. So number 3, okay, if the book is only available in print, you can't buy it, think about why you would be putting parts of the book in a course pack. Again, unfortunately, saving students money isn't a fair use factor. However, a factor might be, like I said, that the library is closed and you can't provide that any other way. One option I would suggest you might consider, rather than putting a whole bunch of the book into a course pack, is maybe considered controlled digital lending. I don't know if you've heard much about controlled digital lending. It's like all over, spent all over the library world this year. It's called CDL. If you're wondering about it, I recommend you go to this controlleddigitallending.org website. So the idea is that a library would digitize a book in their print collection. The digital copy is protected so that it's set up to be loaned out to one person at a time, sort of like a checkout. and it's protected from the student or whoever printing it or downloading it or copying it. So it does involve some technical aspects. The print book is removed from circulation. So the idea is you have not created your library having a second copy of the book. You have just changed formats. You still only have one copy of the book. I would think this is more justified if there isn't an electronic version for you to purchase. Like, if you say, I would love to purchase this ebook, but it's not available, so I will be doing controlled digital lending. MSU Library is doing this for our reserve books this fall. And it is, we only decided to do it for books that were not available for us to purchase in e-format. So I think it's working out pretty well, but it did take some setting up. So that's that part. So the Digital Millennium Copyright Act of 1998 is the part that says you can't circumvent protections on audiovisual materials to digitize them or create copies, except in certain circumstances. And every 3 years, a group gets together and decides what those exceptions are. So the most recent exceptions are to enable assistive technologies, captioning by disability services offices, and then using screen capture to circumvent short portions of movies for educational uses. So this is still not really what we like to see, because again, it's only allowing short portions of movies. It's not allowing whole movies. So it's really hard to deal with that. So I got the question, can I change the format of videos or music to make them available digitally? So I'm sorry, the answer isn't that great on this, because it usually involves circumvention. And all the classes I've taken on copyright, those copyright lawyers have not suggested that we can start circumventing because of the pandemic. This exception only allows for short portions. So if you want to make, if you want to do clips and things, that's great. But the watching movies, you can't circumvent and start digitizing your movies and make them streaming. Unfortunately, you also can't invoke fair use if you're doing illegal circumvention in order to make the fair use happen. So that's not so great. But then another question is, can I share videos or music live via Zoom with a class? So here I'm a little more unsure. First of all, check if a license is involved. If it's library license stuff, usually that's no problem. The students can all watch it, and like I said, we got a license to even show it via Zoom to, the public for a film night. But most Netflix videos and things specifically say you can't share with others. So professors have asked me about their own Netflix accounts, and I have to say that. If there's no license, then consider fair use factors. How much of the film is needed for the teaching purpose? Is there a streaming version or an alternative available for library purchase instead? I guess if the answer is no on these, then here, I didn't write this on my slide, but here's where it's really up to you and your legal counsel and your library director decide how much risk you want to take. If you go through all these things and you're like, there's no license, but we need to watch the video together, there's no streaming, then maybe your library or whoever decides that it's okay for your campus professors to share a movie via Zoom with your class, and treat that like a face-to-face classroom. You could decide that, or you could not. I can't give you an answer. It's all things to think about and decide what your institution wants to do. It is nice if you can come up with like an actual decision for your campus. So it's not that some people are doing one thing and then others are doing another and you don't really know. So those are things to think about. So the COVID considerations is that COVID and university closings, library closings can be part of a fair use determination, but they don't give you carte blanche to just do what you want, of course. And some things don't change, that you still have to follow your terms of your licenses. You can't circumvent protected materials except short portions. You still need to consider whether you're having an effect on the market and why you're doing things. But I recommend that you thoughtfully think out your decisions, be consistent, check with the higher ups about why you're doing things, be prepared to justify it, and get legal advice if you're worried about risk. Okay, so anyway, I'm happy to take questions. I hope that made some sense.
I have, oh, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say there's things in the chat I didn't see but anyway, go ahead.
Yeah, I have one question. Somebody in the chat commented, I can't find it now, but like, I thought you could copy like 20% of a book or something like that. And I worked in Course Reserve for a little while, and I remember like little rules of thumb that we had in place like that. Those are more just kind of like guides that people use, right? Those aren't like actual part of the copyright law or anything, right?
So the law does not say any percentage. So you and your institution have to decide what you're comfortable with. Some institutions say 10%, some say 20. It's all up to you to decide what is a reasonable portion that does not take the place of the entire textbook. So, yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, Buzz term at Charleston. I know, CDL. Oh, okay. Overdrive. Yes, they have that CDL options covered. Okay. Somebody says right on still abides by first sale doctrine. Oh, are you talking about the CDL also? Yeah, it's not this really exactly first sale doctrine because it's really talking about the thing in hand, the book you own. But a bunch of people with actual law degrees from libraries wrote a whole white paper on CDL and why they believe it's legal. So I encourage you to check that out if you want to get into the details.
Okay, so the spirit first sale, but not necessarily the whole same format concept then. Because the AV always trips me up. I hate the DMCA, but that's a personal opinion.
Right. Did somebody have a question?
I have a question. I think I know what you're going to say, but we have found several titles that have been used for years. They're on VHS. They don't exist in any other format anymore. We own them. Can we digitize them? Can we make those available?
Yeah, and that is a topic of much controversy. I just prior to this, I attended a copyright webinar on preservation, and it mentioned obsolete formats. So, you might be doing it for preservation purposes or access purposes. There's a lot of different things that libraries can be looking at. Yeah, many believe that libraries are not pushing things far enough and saying we need to be able to digitize this for, preserving it for access for the future. That's a little different argument than just saying we have a class this semester that wants to watch it. There's a whole lot of things to think about. Again, I can't decide for your institution, but any one of these things I've talked about, you can go to the ALA website and they will give you like what, librarians kind of have consensed around our best practices in some of these areas. So I don't know. At MSU, we have not really started doing that at this point. But I don't know, it may be something we should look at. I'm sorry, I can't give you like definitive answers. It's like, I don't have the answer on that.
It was years ago, but I did write an article about legal issues in archives with oral histories. And one of the things, granted, it's like 10 years ago now, I feel old. I talked about was that, trying, essentially you could digitize it for preservation, but it had to be behind a login so that you approve the authorized users for some things, like orphaned oral histories, where you're like, they intended them to be shared, but you don't have like a specific, thing in your gift or deed of gift that says, oh yeah, you could totally digitize these, because they didn't think of that, back when they were recorded. So. And at EMU, we had a similar discussion about the Gordy Motown stuff, because I'm like, we can't publish that. Michael Jackson's family has all that copyright. We can't just, do all those albums out in the free web.
Well, right. It does depend on who the copyright owner, and the oral histories may also have some privacy issues. I don't know. There's a lot of things that could go into that. Probably your strongest case is for your obscure video that is just never, ever going to be in digital format, that kind of thing. Yeah, Michael Jackson stuff, probably not quite the same level of obscurity. Because have to be behind a login. I think that's often what people do to minimize risk for their institution. It doesn't mean that it's has to be that way, but sometimes people are like, well, we're not sure how legal this is, so we'll put it behind a login, and then it's not going to go out on the web and be like a red flag. That's one way to go. A lot of legal counsels are really all about risk rather than trying to figure out what's actually legal. So
isn't video trust where they're trying to figure out ways to put video content that cannot be accessed otherwise?
Yeah, that was brought up in this copyright webinar I just attended last hour. They mentioned the video trust. So people are working on these issues. And I'm glad to see libraries getting together on these issues, because that makes a stronger case than just, one library kind of just doing their own thing.
I was wondering, I've asked this question before and I've never really gotten an answer that makes sense to me, but how do you decide what is obsolete? What format is obsolete? I consider VHS obsolete, but I know people that still have VHS recorders. I know people that have beta recorders and players. And so where does that become obsolete? Who makes that decision?
Well, Yeah, I mean, again, I would want to look, I mean, this video trust, I would want to see, I don't know exactly what their definition is. I'm not specifically in the obsolete formats area. I mean, I know our library has VHS players and beta players and everything so people can watch it there because we know they're not going to be able to take it home and watch it. But of course, now that's not very usable, is it? So that doesn't help professors. I haven't had any professors ask me about VHS tapes actually during COVID so far. They've mostly been talking about DVDs. So DVDs are not obsolete at this point. They're considered a still a viable format, but VHS might be.
Well, like you said, a lot of times the copyright holder or the licensor has something to say. You know, we've seen where they say you can't convert the format, or they make it available. I mean, I think that partly a lot of the stuff we most likely to use is probably going to be available for licensing, and then the problem, of course, is the cost. I know one of the things we run into, and it's not really a copyright thing, but it's just that you know, like you could watch a movie, say every student could pay $3 and watch it on Amazon, but the professor won't assign it that way, and they want the library. It's kind of more like that's probably conversation. They want the library to pay like $200, say, to license it. That's kind of, well, the student, yeah, I mean, there is that. A lot of it is available, I guess is all I'm saying, and so that comes back to the licensing question.
Yeah, you know, I mean, your library, I mean, the MSU library is probably different than any of your other libraries. People have a strong, they don't want students to have to pay for stuff. Seems to be the thing now. So we get kudos from the provost for providing things so students don't have to pay for it. Now, I don't know, I'm sure there's a limit. But yeah, we get a lot of goodwill from the university if we do license that video instead of telling students to each pay $3. And that has worked in our favor by looking like we are really on board with the university. Now, of course, your mileage may vary, whatever's going on at your institution, I don't know, but that has what really has gotten the library at MSU to be very much appreciated by all the deans and the provost. It's because of everything we provided for classes. And they were so ecstatic at how we stepped up like this spring too. So yeah, I don't know. But a lot of times, I mean, there's no option for the library to buy the thing. If it's on Amazon, often it's not even an option for libraries. So sometimes I do have to go back and say, you know, I'm sorry, the library can't buy this. You can either choose a different video. We've got hundreds of other videos, or everybody might just have to get, you know, a rental or something on this.
We are over our time. That's okay. Thank you everyone for coming and having a discussion. Thank you to Susan and to Beth for presenting. We appreciate our presenters very much. I will post the half I recorded. Well, I'll send that to Heather so she can post it on the MiALA website with our group. Beth, would you be willing to send your slides so I can post those as well if they can do that? And thanks everybody and have a wonderful day.
Bye, thank you.